culturally, I was taught to keep my head down, blend in, don't rock the boat, because if you do, you will get dinged. And this is something that we all kind of share culturally because our parents did this so that they can make it in this country, so they can make a future for us. And so because of that, Jessalin and I share stories about how we go into the workplace and standing out is really hard for us because we weren't given the tools to know how, but we were also culturally told not to.
Three, two, one. Welcome to the Campfire Circle. I'm your host, Tanya Bhattacharya, and I empower purpose-driven women in building influential personal brands that drive change and raise revenue. We all talk about getting a seat at the table, but why though? Who wants to sit in a stuffy boardroom anyway? Let's reimagine the ultimate space of leadership as a campfire circle, where we share stories that inspire movements, build brave communities to huddle together with for warmth, and where there is always room. Come sit with us. Jessalin and Bernice Chao are the co-authors of The Visibility Mindset, a book that explores a variety of stereotypes and barriers faced by Asian professionals working towards visible leadership, including the bamboo ceiling and the model minority myth. Their book provides straightforward challenges and real-life leadership examples to help AAPI and allies navigate pitfalls and challenges as they move forward in their visibility and careers. I am so excited to have both of you with us today at the Campfire Circle. Welcome, Jessalin and Bernice.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. Great to have you. So first of all, first things first, this is the Campfire Circle. We're all about stories and storytelling. So I would love to know if you could tell me the story of how you two met and how this collaboration emerged.
Absolutely. I'm happy to talk about how Jessalin and I connected. We actually met virtually. It was 2021. It was the height of xenophobia towards Asian, specifically East Asian women. This was a time where I think the advertising and marketing agencies started to realize that they should start including people of AAPI descent on panels. And so Adweek had a conference, a town hall that was really inspiring. And then I attended another one by Ascend. And at this time, I was really interested in networking. And so I was popping into my LinkedIn, into the chat. Jessalin was also on her end, also reaching out and meeting people. So we actually connected for a virtual coffee chat where I learned so much about what Jessalin was doing, all the clubs she was a part of, and how active she was in the community. And we also shared struggles in our career, difficulties we had navigating our cultural identity and what that meant for upward momentum. And I shared with her at this time that I had an idea to create a nonprofit organization called Asians in Advertising about 5 years ago. And I was finally working at an agency, and this was called David and Goliath. And there was 4 other people that looked like me, and I was really excited. And I was like, we need to start a place for us. There's so many other great organizations for Black people, for Hispanic people, for like all different types. And there was some POC groups out there as well. But when I started looking at their board and kind of the diversity makeup, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And I was really craving a community of people that kind of shared the same cultural struggles I had. And when I had these people get together in a room, it was great the very first meeting. There was so much enthusiasm. They're like, let's do it. The second meeting, it got a little bit less looser, where they were like, oh, I don't know if we really need this. And I think culturally, we like to say, making space for ourselves is very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And when we do so, we are afraid of kind of the repercussions it may have to kind of, have that spotlight on us. And so I shelved this idea, but I did pay for the URL for the next 5 years. And I think you just have to wait until you meet the right person. And just after one conversation with Jessalin, I was like, oh, maybe we should do something with this. It feels like the right time. And I just basically asked her over email. I was like, hey, I have this idea. We talked about it really briefly, but would you want to be my co-founder for an organization called Asians in Advertising? And she responded back. She's like, I don't know what this is, but yes. And so I told her, I'm going to build the website on a Saturday on Squarespace. And she just kind of looked at it on Sunday. We posted it on Monday with one networking event. And I actually only thought a couple people would care. I was like, 20 people would be a huge success. And we had over 600 signups. And this was just
Wow.
like out the gate when we just, just got on the map. And so it just really showed to both of us that there was really a need for a community like this to be out there.
100%. That's an incredible story. And it just goes to show like timing is everything, but also that like no energy is ever wasted. It's only stored. That's a quote by James Clear that I live by. And so like the fact that you two had that, potential energy, you're just waiting and that 600 people joined. I can just imagine what that must have been like on the Zoom, scrolling from like page to page, just clicking that arrow and seeing so many faces, right? That reflected you back. And that's wonderful, especially because I know that you two are bi-coastal. So the opportunity for you two to meet in that way may not have necessarily been able to happen 10 years ago, right? 15 years ago, but now is the time. What a great story.
Yeah. And I don't think we met in person till about 8 months later. So that was really nice to finally meet someone that I was seeing on the regular and talking to on the regular in person. And I mean, we are so blessed. It's about a year and a half later, and we are about 3,700 members, and we're global.
That's such a huge impact. That is phenomenal. And I too have recently been meeting people more recently that I've only known virtually. And that first big hug is the best. That is the best. So I want to ask you all these questions about the book itself. But before I get into that, I have kind of a follow-up question to your story, because I love so much that so much of this started from a LinkedIn DM and a virtual coffee chat. It just so demonstrates that so many good things come from building community. And so, I know that sometimes, especially today in this era of being Zoom fatigued and just overwhelmed with things on my calendar, I'm sometimes reluctant to schedule those coffee chats just to give myself some white space to breathe. And I also know that relationships move at the speed of trust, and that one-on-one personal FaceTime is really key in building collaborative relationships like yours. So would you be open to sharing some advice on what you feel like needs to be present, or how to prepare, or how to maybe even follow up, whatever you want to share about coffee chats to turn that new relationship into a generative partnership like yours?
Happy to jump in and share about that, to even add to what Bernice was saying, because from our initial virtual chat, it was also just amazing to hear her story. So I would say it's even just the first meeting that you have with the person when you're getting to know them. There was like immediate synergy between Bernice and I, where we had the same energy of like the same goals and values. And then just in terms of how, when I met Bernice, one, she's just an amazing person. Like the fact that she had the foresight to buy like agencyadvertising.com, that was like a big deal. And I was like, wow, it's like, you're amazing. Like, I was like, even though I just met you, I was like, let me know what you do with it, and let me know. I'm happy to share it with my network in the future. And then two, she was also at the time pregnant with her second kid. And at the time I was like family planning. Now I have a 6-month-old daughter. But at the time it was amazing to meet another like working mom. And I'm like, oh, this is someone like I want to stay in touch with, because I want to learn tips from her. Like, how do you learn how to like work-life balance as a working parent? And then also she's organizes TEDx talks and is a creative in the industry. So you don't see that like an Asian creative. And so for me, it was just, the more I got to know her as a person, I was like, this is someone I want to stay in touch with. So I would say when you're having virtual coffee with someone, is it someone you want to get to know even more? Then the next thing, it's like, how can you stay in touch? Like whether it's offering resources. And then in her case, I think we stayed in touch by following each other on LinkedIn and seeing what we posted. And then as she mentioned, when she emailed me to be her co-founder, I was like, I don't know what it is or what we're going to create, but we need a community. So then I was like, this will be like a fun project, like something we do for fun. And like what Bernice has been saying, how it's grown so organically has been amazing. So I think in terms of when you're connecting with people to have those deep connections, really, I would say make sure it's someone that inspires you, someone you can learn from. And then when you're trying to nurture those relationships, like what are the things that you want to do, whether it's did they recommend a book that you read and you could follow up with them, or even before you end the first meeting, when you know you want to stay in touch with them, make that suggestion of like, I would love to do this again. Like maybe we could do this quarterly or monthly. Like, let me know what works for you, or even share events that you're attending. So then there's opportunities for you to connect again.
Those are great tips. Those are really, really, really great tips. And then, like you said, in between those pre-scheduled meetings, you're staying in touch on LinkedIn, et cetera. And I love the idea that you just said about maybe even like reading the same book and staying up to date with that. There's so many different personal ways that you can infuse that in. So I love that. So I want to get into the book itself because I am obsessed, and I would love for you to tell me in your own words, what is the visibility mindset and what are the unique challenges that AAPI face in growing their visibility?
So I want to start with the title itself. One thing that I grew up with, and I think a lot of people in this culture grew up with, is the fact of assimilation. I always share that my parents, they came to this country back in the 70s and they renamed themselves and they became Nelson, Ingrid. I became Bernice. Like, I was born here, but like, these are very, I would say, white classical names. They're not even a common name. And I think it was just so they could fit in because they knew what they looked like was going to make them stand out. And so culturally, I was taught to keep my head down, blend in, don't rock the boat, because if you do, you will get dinged. And this is something that we all kind of share culturally because our parents did this so that they can make it in this country, so they can make a future for us. And so because of that, Jessalin and I share stories about how we go into the workplace and standing out is really hard for us because we weren't given the tools to know how, but we were also culturally told not to. And I always give the comparison of the very American idiom of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I was taught the loudest duck gets shot. I was taught loudest bamboo gets cut, the tallest nail gets hammered down. And so when I go into a room and it's a large boardroom of free-flowing ideas like a Super Bowl campaign pitch, I go in that room and I'm like, okay, I'm going to just write all the notes. I'm going to be super attentive. And then I'm going to go back to my desk and have really good concrete thoughts that I can then turn in later. Everyone else in the room is popping off like half thought out answers first thing in their brain. I am not comfortable with that because I don't want to look like I'm showing up not 100% because we were told to do that. And so visibility mindset is like, all this is really understanding. Yes, we get you. We get that this is hard. We know that this isn't just you. This is something that you could have learned and you're not alone. A lot of people are feeling this way. But how do you have that mindset that when you do go in the room, you know that you have to speak? And are there things that you can talk about so that it's comfortable for you? So whether it's a clarifying question, whether it's, Jessalin had just mentioned this amazing thing to me, even offline, that I want to bring here, or I can be like, okay, adding to that idea. But knowing that your idea doesn't have to be perfect when you do say it out loud, you're just helping to build more puzzle pieces for everyone else to kind of grow out from.
I relate and resonate with that so much. Jessalin, were you getting ready to say something?
Yeah. I wanted to share for my experience because when it comes to even the title, the visibility mindset, I think Bernice too, but I'll speak for myself. Like I've experienced a lot of toxic workplaces and being like the only person of color in the workplace. And when there were times of trying to speak up to get a promotion, I would be passed up for the offer. And then to be transparent, a white person is hired or promoted into a leadership position that I could have easily gotten. And so that's the feeling of feeling invisible in the workplace. And then that's the reason of leaving companies. And that's why we wanted to create something more of a positive twist of like, how can we create this visibility mindset and teach people, whether it's our community and even allies, of how to support the Asian community, because it's also with our culture, like especially with like Asian culture, I feel like it's challenging speaking up or asking for help. And like that leads to having more visibility, because in order to do that, you like for networking, you need to know how to ask for help, or to get a mentor, you need to know like, what are the things that speak up for and what are the things that you're looking for? So a lot of that, we teach those tips in the book, and it's definitely a lot of unlearning things, that old ways or things that have been taught to us culturally or even through like corporate America from the experiences that we have, and being able to learn and reframe different ways to redefine the future of the workplace.
100%. Because now is the time. Now is the time to be able to do that. I mean, I can just share that even being able to share my thoughts via chat in a team Zoom versus having to like state it verbally in the fray of a team huddle has been so helpful for me in helping me reclaim my voice, because it's just helpful, right? And so, I just love what you said. I can share from my personal experience. For me, it's very much been a scenario with my parents around being like Harvard and hard work, right? Like put your head down, put in the long hours, go to the prestigious place, and you will succeed. And then, like you said, Jessalin, as we get into the workforce, we begin to see these systemic factors at play. And I agree with you that especially now, there are tools available to us and allies available to us. There are things that we can do to really unlearn and democratize visibility and really reclaim that influence, that power. And we should. And so digging deeper into that, you've created a roadmap for this. Would you be able to share an overview of the book's chapters and the contents?
Yes. The book has 12 chapters, and it's actually broken out into 3 sections. The first section is called Improving Yourself. So chapters here would be finding your voice, knowing your personal brand and how to build it. The second section is called Working with Others. So talking about mentorship, microaggressions, and networking. And then lastly, it's called Redefining the Workplace for the Future. So leveraging allyship and integrating DEI in learning and development. So making this a very, easy to use roadmap of how you can actually use the tips that we learned from Asian leaders and to bring into your own life.
So listen, I know you want to stand out as a go-to, influential, trusted voice on LinkedIn, not just to boost your revenue and raise your rates, but to also drive change and build community with other decision makers. That's why I created this free masterclass for people who are serious about turning their LinkedIn into a hub of opportunities without spending a ton of time online or creating content. I'm demystifying LinkedIn once and for all by sharing actual to-do lists and the same insights I've taught to over 50 social impact entrepreneurs, so they too can be lazy on LinkedIn. Even by spending 1 hour on LinkedIn, my clients attract aligned, hell yes clients, inspire people to think differently about the misunderstood issues that they work on, and book dreamy podcast spots and paid speaking opportunities. So if you're interested in working with me to build up your brand as an approachable authority, apply for your spot in the free masterclass using the link in the show notes. Okay, back to the episode. There's a couple things that you mentioned, and I want to follow up on that. One is really leveraging allies in this work. Can you talk to me a little bit about how we might be able to do that or begin to be able to do that?
I'm happy to share an example of that because that's also key. And that's why with our book, we tell people that it's not just for Asian professionals, it's also for allies to understand what we're facing when it comes to the workplace and how you can support us. So one example is that like allies, they can help when it comes to educating themselves. And in addition to educating themselves, they can speak up for the community. So it's not always the burden of the marginalized community that has to speak up for it. And I'll give you an example. In one of my previous workplaces, with everything happening with the Asian community, I mentioned to a colleague of mine, I was like, oh, I'm disappointed. Like leadership didn't say anything about it. And it was just a casual conversation. And the next day, this colleague who is not in like an executive leadership position, he is just part of the Black ERG. And he sent out an email to the entire staff to say, here's what's been happening with the Asian community. And here's what you can do to support. Here are articles you can do. And I was blown away because at that time, I was still digesting everything that happened that I honestly didn't have words of like educating people. Like I was still processing it and figuring out what I want to do and everything. So it was just, it definitely made me cry to see that and like happy tears to know that there are people out there. And that's something that people can do to be an ally because it speaks volumes to say like, not only like checking in, he checked in with me just to see how I'm doing, but he's also taking the action without even waiting for the company to do something about it.
That's so great. And that reminds me of a conversation I had earlier in this podcast where I interviewed Ruchika Tulshan, where she really talks about how inclusion is a practice and we can be inclusive on purpose. It takes all of us to be able to do that.
And it really, we are interdependent. And so when we see allies, I love that you cried happy tears because I think I would do the same thing. I love that story. And it also reminds me of something which is starting to come up in my own experience and culturally, in that asking for help from other people can sometimes be seen as a sign of weakness. Like we are supposed to like keep it inside, keep it in the family. Like even when I worked in the mental health care space, and there was I'm having a hard time coming up with the word, but something that a reason why Asian families did not always seek care is there was a difficulty in asking for help. And so how do you suggest maybe navigating that? Because I think that asking for help is important, not just from this allyship conversation, but from growing our brand in general and being more visible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that you mentioned that, because we mentioned that in our book, and we have different chapters. Like one is on prioritizing mental health. And then we have one that's finding your optimal work-life balance. And the one on mental health, we made sure that that was a separate chapter because it's such a topic that our community doesn't really talk about often. And even I'll speak for myself, as an Asian, like I haven't seen a therapist until 2018. So until my adulthood, then I finally saw my first therapist. And it's hard to ask for help because it's like, I feel like and I'm still working on this now, of like, when something's not okay, I'm like, oh, everything's okay. Where it's like, no, it's not. And like, there are things that I need to do, like communicating the needs that I have. So a lot of it is practice and being able to utilize that, or leaning on people for support and accountability. And when it comes to mental health, it's also reminding people to put your oxygen mask like on yourself before you put it on others. So it's really important. And in the book, we talk about that too, of like how to be visible. You really have to be more intentional with like how you're showing up, and how you're taking care of yourself is going to impact that in all aspects of your life, not only just in the workplace too. And so for Asians, a lot of us grow up thinking that we don't know how to ask for help. So we teach a lot of tips on how they can practice, and it does take time too.
Yeah, it takes practice, right? It does. It takes getting 1% more uncomfortable with each ask, but we get there. And there's another related piece in that it's related to what we just talked about, but there's a little bit of a distinction, which is I think that piece around being trained up not to share our authentic, maybe vulnerable story, or like save face, not share any dirty laundry, like always preserve and protect our honor and that kind of thing. And I have found that in growing my own personal brand, like it's those authentic stories of maybe where we failed or where we didn't do something so great that really builds that resonance and trust and relationship in a couple of different ways. So I don't know, do you have any kind of thoughts on your own personal experience in that way, or what you might share with somebody who's struggling with that? They're stuck in between those things.
So the advice around how to show up as yourself, I try to find the ways to show up in a way that can make both parties understand that. So I don't want to come in there, totally different, being, just who I am unapologetically. I actually kind of go into the room in a way that makes me relatable. So one of the things that we talk about in the book is that a lot of managers and hire people, like when they look at the next candidate to hire, they want someone that's a mirror of themselves because they see a lot of potential in someone that really resonates with them. So when I go into the room and my creative vertical does not look like me, I'm a tiny 5'2", probably look a little younger than I actually am, Asian woman. And I'm usually up against, 6 feet plus white man who's probably graying a little earlier and just looks a lot more distinguished than me, or the presence is just bigger. There's also just the cultural aspect. Even though I'm American, I was born in, Northern California, I don't have the same points of reference. So I can't go in the room and I'm like, oh yeah, totally down with the latest sneakers and the latest, thing in football. I just don't have those points of references. So most of the time I go into these rooms, and especially before the main meeting or the main briefing, I don't have anything to say. And I'm usually in the room just nodding along, like I totally get it, totally know that hair metal band from the 70s. Yeah, totally. And I don't. And it's so uncomfortable for me to pretend I know, but it's also super awkward if I go, no clue what you're talking about. Can we change the subject? And so what is that balance? And so one of the things that we actually talk about that book is what can you learn before you get into the room? So for me, I kind of get a sheet of everyone who's in the room. I kind of do a little dive on the internet because we all are somewhere on social media, on LinkedIn, however, and I'm just trying to find ways that I can have those points of commonality. So I can, direct the conversation there. So I can lean into an interest that we both share so that I still can be authentic and still make this person see me as someone that they can get along with as well. And so that's one of those tips that we offer in the book.
I love that tip. That's so good. And it kind of reminds me a little bit about when I was a fundraiser, in that you're right. There is a lot of information available online, and it's actually such a great relationship builder. I love that. I love that. You are both definitely visible now in a variety of ways. You're launching this book into the world. You have this incredible, community. If you could talk to your previous self who was really struggling to be seen and heard and valued, what advice would you give her?
I'm happy to go first to share because it also relates to your previous question about being vulnerable. Because the reason I paused before, I was like, let me try to think of an example. But for me personally, and this is probably how it led me to be in diversity, equity, inclusion, is that I've personally always been myself at work. I've gotten in trouble for it or not get promoted for it, but I speak up for myself because I think of it. A lot of people now applaud me. They're like, wow, you're so brave. But I'm like, kind of look at it as survival though, because if I'm not going to speak up for myself, who else is going to do it? I don't have someone to sponsor me throughout early on, especially early on in my career. So I would say for my younger self who didn't know, keep doing what I'm doing in that sense of you're doing a great job, you're going in the right direction, which at that time, my younger self early on in my career, I gathered a lot of mentors. I asked for help and really tried to figure out what I wanted to do and pave the way by not by myself, but in the sense of building a community and building my network and being able to have those people to lean on when I needed the help. And I say that because I remember early on in my career, a mentor had told me, because I worked in toxic workplaces and I explained what I was dealing with to a mentor. And she was like, you're like an abused puppy and you don't realize it. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I was I didn't get it until now. I'm because now I fortunately work in a great workplace and I'm like, oh, wow. I wouldn't know what a good workplace is when it's my first job out of college or second, third, or whatever. I haven't experienced a good workplace. So I would say to my younger self, keep, if anything, look for a place that is going to celebrate you and appreciate you and elevate you. When it's putting you in for a promotion or creating opportunities and making sure that you're heard and wanting to hear your perspective, because those are the places that are going to help you thrive and grow. And early on in my career, my younger self would escape a lot of those environments that didn't allow that. So that's what I would say to my younger self.
And to add to that, for me, I'm definitely more on the introverted side. When I was struggling, I just held it in. And in Chinese, we have a phrase called "siku," which actually means eating bitterness. And I was taught to never let the crack show. Oh, whatever's happening with you, that stays home. That other self that looks really shiny goes outside. And so for me, I didn't know to ask for help. And when I was really struggling, I felt really terrible. I felt really hopeless. I didn't know what to do. And I didn't realize how important advocating for yourself is. And I would tell my younger self that no one can do a better job than yourself. And you have so much ways to show up in the world that people can really see who you are and to not be, not to hide things that you're suffering either. Talk to people, have a community network to share those experiences, but also celebrate all your wins. Because if you're not in the club, the bro club, the, hangout dates, the football watching, you're not open to some of those opportunities. And so when first of mind of promotions, opportunities comes by, they think of the person that they last saw. And if it's not you, you're probably not thought of. But you can also write these things on LinkedIn, share it on your own channels. And maybe when they do come up with those promotions, they can think of your name subconsciously. Someone can Google you and be like, oh, it's on your about page. You could just talk about your wins. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you're just celebrating, things that make you unique so that you can be included in those conversations as well. So I tell my younger self, advocate. You're your best advocator.
Yes, 100%. And it's not bragging or it's not, having a big ego. It's simply, sharing who you are so that others can see you in the light that is intended and, celebrate you in the way that you're meant to be celebrated. That is great. I have a follow-up question for you, and I would love to know a little bit more if you're willing to share about the process of birthing a book out into the world, because I think that that's a way to get visible. For sure, that's a way to get visible. And I know a lot of folks who are listening have a book in their heart. They have it in their soul, and it might feel like a really daunting task to get it out. Share more with me. What was that process like? Any tips that you have? We'd love to know.
I could share here. We probably have a different process than most people. There's so many different ways. We have learned this since. You can self-publish. There's Kindle Press, which is Amazon. You can have a proposal, submit it to a bunch of agents to then get you to a publisher, or you could have a deal with a publisher straight out. And so for us in January of this year, we actually got an email from a publisher who I think Googled Asian career help, and found our organization and actually pitched us a book for us to write. And so we didn't already have a proposal. We didn't have anything as a semblance other than who we were as a nonprofit. And we were really fortunate. Our acquisitions editor, her name is Victoria Savan. She is actually an AAPI woman herself, and she really wanted this book. And so she really believed in, getting more Asian voices out there into the community. And so she has been a huge champion of us and has kind of been working with us in terms of the book development, what we would talk about, and really finding that white space in the market to come out as kind of the first one to really address this head on.
I was also birthing the book while I was pregnant and on maternity leave. So I feel like it definitely is a lot. And what has helped me is having Bernice as the co-author too, having us as a team, because we have different skill sets. We're able to divide and conquer where we each wrote a chapter. So we wrote 6 chapters each, and then we're able to cross-check and reference each other's chapters and be able to share our different perspective. And also it's really helpful to have the accountability of each other to be okay, I'm writing today, or and being able to check in with each other. So that's a big part of it. And I did want to add for listeners is that if you're thinking about writing a book, do it. We need more authors out there, especially people of color and women. And we were really lucky with our partner at Wiley. She actively looks for people of color and female first-time authors. So we definitely need more of that. So we're just really excited that we're part of that. And I still can't believe it's real.
Congratulations. That's a huge deal. And, it's actually really such a testament to the power of being visible, because you were found on a Google search for exactly what somebody was trying to, collaborate with someone to birth into the world. So what a powerful story. I got to read a preview chapter preparing for this interview, actually, and I noticed that you interviewed other AAPI people as a part of the process. So how did you find those people? Tell me about how you collaborated with others to make this book a reality.
Sure. These are people we knew in our circle that we really respected in their careers or what they were doing outside their careers to actually help the space as well. We definitely wanted people that really resonated with things that we wanted to kind of bring out in terms of visibility. So we didn't want it to be oh, here's a chapter and then a random interview. We definitely wanted to correlate and make sure it was authentic to the person we were actually interviewing.
Yeah. That's great. And by doing so, you get to build your community in an even more beautiful way and get the book in front of more people. So I would love to know a little bit as we close out the conversation about the future. I would love to know, and I ask this to close out all of our interviews, what is your big dreamy vision for the future that you're working towards creating?
I'll say with the book, with the visibility mindset, we are definitely hoping that it can be like an essential career guide for the AAPI community and allies, and that people can use that. And hopefully there will be more books that are like that, because even with Wiley, they're saying that it's the first of its kind in like so many years since the book, The Bamboo Ceiling, Breaking the Bamboo Ceiling. So definitely want people to be able to reference that, and also just being able to continue to be visible. So it would be amazing for us to keep seeing representation when it comes to leadership. I mean, especially when it comes to, specifically in this case, that the topic we're talking about is for Asians, because even right now, like in the Fortune 500 leadership, there's only 2.6% are actually Asian. So it would be great for there to be more representation, not only just Asian leaders, but just marginalized communities, for them to be elevated. And for me now, like being a first-time mother, like with my daughter who's 6 months, like I'm hoping like when she grows up, she won't have to face a lot of the like toxic workplaces that I did. Like I want her to be able to feel like she can be comfortable in her own skin and be herself and be able to thrive in whatever career or life that she has, and see representation that we didn't see when we were younger.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Bernice, did you want to add to that, or do you feel complete?
No, I'm happy to add to that. One of the stats that we read was that, 20% of Asian American men don't feel like they fundamentally belong in the workplace. And that's 16% of women. And that's the lowest of any group out there, including Black women, LGBTQ+. And it makes me so sad. I mean, that so many people just don't feel like they belong in the room. And that feeling is something that I know very well. And so my hope is that we can change those percentages, even just by a fraction, to make sure there's space for everybody in the room, that they can feel included, that they can share their voice and be themselves.
100%. And as we do that, we'll move the world towards the more just future that it's always meant to be, as we get all of this, diversity of thought, as we all begin to be able to share freely. That is a beautiful vision, and I am here for it. I'm so here for it. So I cannot wait to read my copy of The Visibility Mindset from cover to cover. How can our listeners get a copy?
Well, it's actually available in a lot of different places. You can actually go to our website, which is visibilitymindset.com. We have it available at Amazon, Walmart, Target, the big stores, but we also want to encourage people to support their local indie shops as well as the AAPI bookstores. And so we actually have tools on our website to help you locate one near you so you can help small businesses as well.
Oh, that's great. And we will make sure to include those links in the show notes so that people can just easily get to where they're going. And I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart, not just for being here and having this wonderful conversation, but for creating all of the different spaces where AAPI people can come and feel the sense of belonging. And I know it's going to create a ripple effect out into the world in ways that we can't even know or imagine right now.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thank you for having us, and holding a space for this conversation.
Yeah, this was the highlight of my day. Definitely happy to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. This episode was brought to you by my group coaching program, The Kindling Collective. If you like this episode, you are going to love my free masterclass all about thought leadership on LinkedIn. I'm sharing the same proven 3-step framework I also teach in the Kindling Collective to spark change and raise revenue. You'll learn how to grow your influence and your visibility. And yes, we are definitely talking about overcoming that itty bitty shitty committee too. After all, your work is way too important to stay a best kept secret. So grab your link to apply in the show notes and I'll see you there.
What'd you think? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, reach out and let me know through lumosmarketing.co. Yes, that's Lumos, as in the illumination spell from Harry Potter. Because when you shine, magical things happen. You can get social with me on LinkedIn, and of course, check out the show notes to stay in touch with our guests. Let's talk soon.